turn it over to Dr. Paternostro.
Thanks. So thanks for having me here. I'm going to talk to you about how I evolved into teaching large groups of students. I came here 5-6 years ago from one of Penn State's campuses, and I was teaching 35 students at a time. And during the interview, they showed me my classroom, which was an auditorium with 400 seats, and said, here's where you're going to teach. So fortunately, they did it early in the day so I could figure something out, and I got the job. And so what you're going to see is the evolution of this large group. You see flipped classrooms, you see blended classrooms, you see all kinds of things. I personally think that large teaching is not going to go away. It's economical, and if you do it right, it is actually very effective. So I'm going to kind of give you some ideas on how I do that. I'm going to show you, I teach in the medical school. So I teach undergraduates at a 200 level course all the way up through first year medical students, and so I incorporate these at various levels depending on what I'm doing, but I try to do it in all my classes. So you're going to get some science today. I'm going to do some mock classroom stuff with you to show you specifically how I incorporate that into my classes. So I'm going to even start off with a video clip. And my rule is going to be you don't show video clips that last more than a minute, and I'm going to break the rule to start with here. This is one of my favorite. You've probably all seen it. I love The Big Bang Theory. And I saw this like 3 days ago, so I went online and I found this. So this is pretty appropriate for what we're going to talk about. So hopefully you can hear it.
Good evening. I'm your guest lecturer, Dr. Sheldon Cooper.
I can't get it up any higher.
I was expecting applause, but I suppose stunned silence is equally appropriate. I agreed to speak to you this evening because I was told that you're the best and the brightest of this university's doctoral candidates. Of course, that's like saying you're the most important electron in a hydrogen atom. Because you see, there's only one electron in a hydrogen atom. Best and brightest, my sweet patootie. All right, let's begin. Show of hands. Who here is familiar with the concept of topological insulators? Don't kid yourselves.
And then here's the follow-up, and I'm going to show you one at the end.
I found another tweet from a student at Sheldon's lecture. Dr. Cooper has taken a relatively boring subject and managed to make it completely insufferable. Plus, he looks like a giant insect.
Listen to this one. Does Einstein's theory explain why time flies when you're having fun, but when you're listening to Dr. Cooper, it falls out of the sky dead?
Oh, somebody took pictures and uploaded them to their Flickr account.
Oh, wow. How do you get an entire lecture hall to flip you off at the same time?
Apparently, if you're Sheldon, all you need to do is turn your back.
Hey, Leonard, is your Wi-Fi down? I can't get on.
Oh, Sheldon changed the password. It's now Penny is a freeloader. No spaces.
Thanks. What are you guys doing?
Sheldon gave a lecture at the university tonight. We're reading the reviews.
Oh, how'd he do?
Well, picture the Hindenburg meets Chernobyl meets 3 Mile Island meets Tron 2.
That bad, huh?
Read this woman's tweet.
Listening to Dr. Cooper has made me want to start cutting myself again.
Well, good evening, Leonard, Howard, Raj, freeloader.
So, how'd the lecture go?
In a word, triumphant.
Really? Triumphant?
Oh, yes, you should have seen those young people. They're thirsty for knowledge, drinking in my wisdom. I may have changed a few lives today.
Oh, please let me tell him.
I don't know. I kind of promised Howard.
Tell me what?
Actually, we should all share the moment, Raj, if you would.
Oh, tweets about my lecture. That's rather unfair. That's downright cruel. Plus, insects have 6 legs. Yeah, I'm not familiar with the acronym KMN.
From the context, we think it means kill me now.
Well, suppose everyone's entitled to their own opinion. I think I'll turn in. I don't want to teach those poopy heads anyway.
So the reason that I bring that up, one, because it's funny, But because when you're teaching a large group of students, sometimes you lose that connection with them. You have no idea what's going on. You're in your own little world up there. Sometimes you're on a stage and there's so much other activity going on. And so what I'm going to try to get into today is a little bit is how you create that environment where you seem like you're engaged with your students. So I have this PowerPoint that I didn't bring it with me, but I'll give it to Jenny and she can send it out so you don't have to take notes. Everything will be there for you if you want to take a look at it, and has my email and I'll be happy to talk to you. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at, and again, if you never teach large groups of students, this will apply to any lecture that you do. So we're going to focus on hopefully getting some take-home strategies for teaching, even just thinking about how you teach in new ways. And I'm going to do some specific things. I've never taken an educational theory course in my life. It's all been just, I get in front of the class and started teaching. I've been doing it for 25 years now, so it's kind of evolved that way. But I'm going to talk a little bit about one of an educational theory back in the 70s called Gagne's Events of Instruction. So my thesis for you today is going to be that students struggle inside and outside of a classroom, and they just do. And so we have to figure out ways to make that classroom time an effective time for them where not only they're just sitting there passive, but they're actually engaged in the lecture and actually learning in the lecture. And the way to do that, and especially for a large group, is what you do and how you put your lecture together is the key. Because there are certain things that you can do along the way to create an engagement with your students simply by more than just what's on the PowerPoint slide. So kind of dig into that a little bit today. How do you plan out that 50 minutes? And how do you incorporate some of these things? So I have read this book. I don't know if you ever read the book. You probably didn't because this is kind of a science geek thing. This is called Brain Rules. And this is written by a neuroscientist. And he has all these rules about how to survive with your brain. And so the ones I've highlighted here relate to teaching and learning. Now, this is a horrible slide, and it's done that way for a particular reason. So don't think, oh, my God, he stinks teaching, because this is a horrible slide to teach with. But I'm going to ask you why I did it this way. So the first brain rule that we're going to talk about that is effective is every brain is wired differently. So what's that mean? Our students learn differently. We all know that. How many of you have done the learning style stuff? You've done those self-tests where are you an auditory learner, are you a visual learner, whatever it is. Well, when you're teaching a large group of students, everybody's a different learner. So that throws it out the window. You have to figure out how to deal with all of them. And one of the questions that I always ask myself when I'm putting my lectures together is how do we decide what to present? Do I decide to present it for them or for us as the teacher? And so when you're putting, what do I mean? I guess, because I'm going to ask you guys questions. So what do I mean by that? When you put a lecture together, I'm assuming everybody's doing a PowerPoint lecture just to make this easy. So you're putting a lecture together. When you decide what goes in there, are you deciding to do it for you or your students? And what do I mean for you?
So you can follow your speech. You will not miss important parts.
So I don't want to miss important parts. When I think about something that's very complicated, so if you're going to teach something you think is really complicated, you're going to design it in a way that's most easy for you to present it to your students. Is that always the best way for your students to learn? And the answer is sometimes it's not. So when you put your PowerPoints together, or even any lecture together, you have to take into consideration not just the presentation, but what's going to happen after the presentation's over. What are your students going to get out of that? So you have to be really careful about the design of the actual presentation itself. So the other next brain rule is we don't pay attention to boring things. And obviously that has a lot of implication. And here's some of the real brain rules that go with it. Your brain likes the big picture. It does not like details. And there's a million studies out there that say that when you dig into the details, you start to lose people. Now, we have to teach details. So we have to figure out ways to be able to layer the big picture on top of those details. And that keeps people engaged. Your brain checks out after 10 minutes. And there's been a ton of studies done, maybe 15 minutes. So within 15 minutes of your lecture, students are starting to fade on you. And so you have to figure out how do you re-engage them every 10 to 15 minutes. And there's little tricks that I'll show you how to do that. The brain likes emotion. So when you have emotional arousal, your brain actually learns better. And so that kind of goes to how do I bring in emotion when I'm doing my anatomy and physiology? I'll show you how to do that. But people like that. They want to be engaged. The brain gets turned on. Multitasking reduces productivity. How many of you think you multitask well? No, you don't. See, there's somebody that says they do. It's horrible. Everybody thinks they're great at it. My teenage kids, headphones on, homework, TVs on, video games. It's horrible. So But what do your students do? If I'm in a big lecture, they're all with laptops. I don't know what they're doing on their laptops, right? So I want to try to get them to pay attention to me and not try to multitask. I want them to just to focus on me. So somehow I got to get all that stuff done. Learning and memory. So this is I love this rule. Repeat to remember and remember to repeat. So students' memory occurs within a few seconds of learning. So that's one of the really important take-homes, is they remember things when they learn them. So what happens in that 50 minutes if they're in a class where it's not very engaged and they're just sitting there passively, they're not learning anything. And if that light bulb doesn't go on, then it doesn't go into the memory banks. And so you have to create times in class when the light bulb goes on, because that's when they're going to remember it. I always talk about the weekend memory dump, test on Friday, and then what happens by Monday, they forgot 80% of it, and it's only that 20% that they actually really learned. So we want to try to bring that number up. We have to incorporate things gradually and repeat them over intervals. I say it all the time. This is the 1,000th time I've said this today, but we're going to say it one more time because this is important, and they need to hear that over and over again. And your brain likes patterns. It loves patterns. And I'm going to show you some visual examples today of how patterns play a role in how you learn. So if you can create patterns in your lectures, their brains are going to appreciate that as they're sitting there listening to you. A couple other ones that apply to teaching and learning. You need to stimulate all of your senses, and vision is the dominant sense. All right, so the way this works is we learn best through pictures and not written or spoken words. Now, there are people that say they're auditory, and they probably are, but most brains are visual, and they like pictures, they don't like words. And I have a statement here. What's that say about this slide? We'll come back to that. You need to try to stimulate several senses at once when you're doing it, and you need to reinforce with visual sensations. Okay, so what's that say about this slide? If we learn better through pictures not written or spoken words, you can say it. It's a horrible slide. This would not be a slide I would ever teach with in class, but why is it appropriate for what I just did? Besides that, making that point. So we learn better. Am I asking you to learn any of this? No, I'm just presenting something to you. It's there. I'm not asking you to learn anything, and you're not going to learn it by looking at this. But how many times have you sat in on a lecture, maybe where some of the slides, maybe not that bad, but it's just nothing but bullet after bullet after bullet after bullet. You're not learning anything, so you can't learn that way. So you have to try to create some visual cues to get people moving in the right direction. Okay, so that's the brain rules. And I believe most of those are pretty accurate, and they do work when you're doing the teaching. So what I thought I'd do is I'm going to combine them with this theory from the 1970s. It's Robert Gagne's 9 Events of Instruction. He said if you're going to build a lecture, here are the things that you need to do. So most people think, well, if I think, where am I going to start with a lecture? I'm going to start here. How am I going to present the material? According to Gagne, that's the 4th most important thing to even start thinking about. There are 3 things that you need to do before you even begin lecturing, and then there are 5 things that you need to incorporate into your lecture to make this an effective lecture. And I'm going to run through these with you. I'm going to try to mesh them with the brain rules and see if the theory actually holds with how the human brain actually works. So I'm going to give you examples of how we do all of these things and how I do all these things in a classroom. So gaining attention, informing learners, I'm going to kind of run through these one by one. All right, y'all with me? All right, so we're going to combine them and see what happens. So the way these slides work is I have the Gagne up here, and then I picked out some brain rules that apply to it. I need to get your attention. So you see how I got your attention today? Showed you that little video clip. There are lots of ways to get attention and get students ready to go. Obviously, using media, depending on your discipline, you have stories you can tell. Keep it at, the rule I tell you in a regular classroom is it has to be less than a minute. I mean, you need to get their attention within a minute and really get them started. Here's what we're going to do today. I tell family stories because I teach physiology, which is how the body works. So sicknesses, illnesses. I like to tell stories. I'll tell you a story. I'm going to show you one of the stories I'm going to tell here, which is don't give away the ending. You can do jokes, pose a question. If you're not funny, don't try to tell jokes because it just doesn't work. But if you are, then go ahead and use it. I'll tell you what I mean by don't give away the ending. And this works for me. I don't know if it'll work for you. So I would start off this. When I was an administrator before, one of my people who worked for me was diabetic. And so he was a chemistry professor. And so he was notorious for taking his insulin without eating. And when that happens, your blood sugar levels just drop and your brain turns off. And so one day I went in, I got a call from the nurse, and he was actually in chemistry lab at 8 in the morning, and he went through and basically going into a diabetic coma. And you could see that he was writing on the board, and then it just kind of trailed off as his brain ran out of oxygen. So they are out of glucose. So they called me. You have to shove glucose in his mouth with like orange juice and sugar. So what I do is I kind of tell that story to start with to my students on the day I'm teaching about diabetes. And they think, what do you think about diabetes? When you hear diabetes, what do you think about sugar? That you should stay away from it because your sugar levels are too high. Well, here's a case where somebody's diabetic and we actually need to give them sugar. And so I pose that kind of big picture to the students and say, by the end of this lecture, you'll be able to tell me exactly what he did wrong and how the nurse actually went involved in getting him back to where he's supposed to be. So there's kind of payoff at the end with that little story. So I got their attention, now they know where we're headed, and at the end of this, they should be able to do something for me. So I have this list I keep a notebook of all little things that I think of that I might be able to incorporate into my class. I have bookmarks everywhere, videos, I try to collect all these things so that I can pick and choose them. It takes a while to build that up, but those things are key to keeping things going. Okay, so whatever you do, don't just come in and say, today we're going to start about whatever, and just start lecturing because they need to do something else. Okay, so that's one thing you can do. And I even lay this out based on the week. On Monday, this is what I do to start the class. On Wednesday, maybe I'll do something a little different. So you have an option. You don't have to do that. You need to tell them what they're going to learn today. Now, I showed you the learning objectives. I don't always put those into my PowerPoints, and generally I don't. I have them somewhere else. But you want to maybe review what we're going to cover today, how you're going to do it, how the objectives are relevant to the course, to the real world, something that says this is why this is important today. You lose that a lot, and they don't even know what we're doing. This also deals with the big picture. Here's the big picture concept, and before we get into the details, this is what we're going to do today. So try to do that and at least give them a little bit of sense of where we're headed, and not only what you're going to do, but how you're going to do it. We're going to lecture a little bit, maybe we're going to do small groups, kind of give them a preview of what the next 50 minutes is going to be like. The other thing, I love this. Okay, so one of the things I'm trying to explain to them is how your brain processes visual information. So your brain your eyes collect data, send it to your brain, and your brain takes that image, and it's not raw data. Your brain interprets it because two people can look at the same thing and they can see completely different things. And so I just explained that, but that's kind of boring. So I'm going to show you a cool way to do it. I'm going to show you a picture, and I just want you to yell out. It's a bottle, and I want you to tell me what you see on the bottle. So what do you see? Just tell me what you see. Yell it out. You see a couple. So there's a couple there. Does anybody see anything else? There's a dolphin. 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 This is the bottle of 7 dolphins. So you, all as graduate students, should probably see couples. I mean, that's what students do. We see naked people, all right? So usually I have somebody who yells out, I see dolphins, and I say that kind of tells me a lot about your social life if you're seeing dolphins and not seeing naked people. But on the other side, if there are studies done, if I show this picture to 3-year-olds, what do they say? They shouldn't say that's mommy and daddy. They should say they see dolphins. They have no experience with this, so they're seeing the same image, but they pick the dolphins out immediately. You go to the naked people, and that's the way it should be. And that's what your brain does. So that is 1,000,000 times better than me just saying your brain uses information and experiences to put data together. Okay? And if you want that, that's a great, you can show this in pretty much any class, and I'll give you that. You can have that image and steal it. It's a great one to use. Okay, so there's another way of collecting stuff. So the other thing I do sometimes, Monday I do that, Wednesday I do this, on Friday I do this. I do a mini review. So you can quiz people, you can do whatever, but I think at some point you have to collect them and say, here's what we did all week long before we move on. I get an overhead out, and I still do with a big in an auditorium, and I put the overhead out and I just start writing. And I tell them I don't want you to write any notes down, I just want you to listen. And I start doing terms, and in physiology, the way the body works, I can do flow charts, and I start yelling stuff out and they start yelling stuff back at me, and I do within 3 minutes what we did for almost a whole week. I condense it down and just get them thinking about things again before I move on. So you can even pattern your weeks out depending on what you want to do based on just that minute or two in the front of the class, kind of getting stuff in. Here's the incorporating, gradually repeating and repeating and repeating, and maybe at some point the memory banks are going to kick in and we're going to learn actually what we've been talking about. So even before I start lecturing, these are some of the things that you could consider as you're putting your lectures together. Once you actually present the material, the rule is you lecture in small chunks. You have to pick you have to set up 10 to 15 minute mini lectures. That's kind of the way I do it. Every 15 minutes or so, I need to do one of these little what I call chains up or hooks, because what's your brain doing every 10 to 15 minutes? It's tuning out, and I need to wake the brain back up again. And so I'll show you some of the things that I do for my classes. You want to mix up the media. You want to try to use different things. We could do a whole lecture on how to do a good PowerPoint, but we want to mix it up. You want to use simple examples. There's a million brain rules that follow. I'd ask you this one: teacher, performer, entertainer. What do you think about that? Being an entertainer as a teacher, professor. I get yelled at sometimes for that. It's boring if you're not, right? I mean, it is boring, right? Who wants to sit through 50? I don't want to sit through a boring movie. I don't want to sit through a boring lecture. But I've had some old school professors go, that's not me. I'm here. My job is to simply do this. I'm not here to entertain. Particularly when I teach in medical school, it's a professional program. I shouldn't be doing this stuff. I do this in my medical school classes. I don't care. And they say, if you're losing time. Well, maybe those 2 minutes that I lose doing my little things are more important than the 2 extra slides I could have covered. So you really need to keep them engaged, and that's obvious, but how you do that, that's personal. Everybody has their own way of doing it. I'll show you some other tricks on how to do it as well. All right, so let me show you examples of when I say these lecturing in chunks and then doing something to kind of wake the brain up again. So this looks pretty bad. This shows electrical currents flowing through nerve cells and how there's channels opening, there's ions, electricity flowing, and it's hard. And I'll spend I have like a bunch of different slides to do this, and I'll go through it, and then I'm in 15 minutes they're done. I mean, I can see their brains are done. So I need to show them something a little better than that. So I started talking about a puffer fish. So this puffer fish actually produces a poison that affects these channels. And so if you actually ingest the pufferfish poison, you will start to feel your fingers and your lips will start to get numb because those nerves are no longer being able to process the electrical activity, and you can die from this. Your heart will stop beating and you will die. And so I show them that. This is a little complicated, but here's what's called a channel, and electricity goes through this. This is the pufferfish poison, and it sits and blocks that channel, and all of a sudden the nerve turns off. And I show them this little image of here electrical activity, and when you add the poison, there's no more electrical activity. And then I show them this video, which is another really cool video. So let's see, let's see if I can get this to work. This is online. This is the danger of using YouTube. Okay, so this is actually not the pufferfish, but this is a salamander that has the same poison, and hopefully you can hear this.
This innocent-looking newt enters the frog's field of attack. The frog strikes.
Well, it's hard for you to hear. The frog just ate the salamander that has that poison in it, and then the frog is walking away, and then in a few minutes he's not going to be walking anymore.
The skin contains a deadly poison. Within minutes, the frog is dead.
And I know with the lights it's hard to see, but all of a sudden, out of his mouth comes a little salamander. See? And now the frog's dead, the salamander's going to walk away. So there is a nice little, it's 30-second break. You guys laugh. There's emotional connections to it. All of a sudden, all those little things in a 30-second little video. So I love to throw these kinds of things in and out. Let me ask you a question. You guys use YouTube in class? What's the danger of using YouTube? So have you ever had any bad experiences with YouTube?
Sometimes there's really obnoxious.
Oh, there is. There are obnoxious ads there. The comments that you have to be careful of, so you got to really kind of screen it out to make sure that what you're showing is appropriate. I've had some bad situations where ads popped up that really weren't good for me at that point. So, yeah, but you can use them. The other bad thing is you find them, sometimes they go away. All right, let me show you a couple other examples. So, I teach them about the eye. So this is the retina. Again, it looks messy, and it is. I'm showing them all the layers in the eye and what they have to be able to do. These are the cells that detect the light. But back here, there's a layer called a pigmented layer, all right? And so why would we have a pigmented layer in our eye? So let me show you. When you shine the light into the eye, you've seen it in deers on the highway, and dogs, you see that. So why do those kind of animals have that in their eye when you shine light into it? Their pigmented layer back here has this rainbow color pattern. Why do you think that is? It reflects the light so they can see better at night. So what happens is as the light comes in, these cells are supposed to pick it up, and any light they don't pick up will hit this, bounce back, and have them a second opportunity to pick it up. Now, when I shine light into your eye, well, here's actually what it looks like, a real cow's eye dissected. That's the layer back there. I know, you guys weren't expecting this today, were you? And then when I shine light into your eye, what I see is the red. That's where the red eye comes from. What does that tell you about, you don't have that layer, and we don't see very well at night. What you see there are the blood vessels in the back of the eye. That's why you get red eye when you flash light into a camera. Okay. I love this one too. So this is how your brain processes information. This is stuff coming in from your skin. And if you look at how the brain is organized here, there's a map of your body on the brain. So when you touch your lip, a certain part of your brain actually becomes activated, so you know your lip's being touched, or your hand, or whatever. So what do you notice about that map there? So this is a map of your body on the brain. Is that what you look like? No, what's wrong with that map? What are the biggest areas? Your face and your hands. So what's that tell you? The most sensitive parts of your body have the biggest area of the brain devoted to them. Your elbows or your back has very small. If you turn that into a three-dimensional image, this is what your brain thinks you look like. Yeah. So this is the one we were talking about here. This is the sensory brain. This is the motor brain. This is the brain that controls your muscles. Look how much of your brain is devoted to controlling your hands and your face and your eyes. That's where you get the fine, delicate control of movement, and that's pretty cool. And over here, the sensation, the most sensitive parts are your face and your hands. So again, just to show the architecture of the brain, I spent a lot of time doing a lot of the real anatomy, and then we turned to this. So then I posed a question to him. What does this look like in a rat? And it's called a sensory homunculus, which means little man in the brain. So if you were going to draw a rat's brain like that, and I actually make him do it. I'd say stop and take a second. It has nothing to do with the class, but I want him to do it. So if you were going to draw a rat's brain, instead of looking like this, what do you think the rat's brain would look like relative to that? Nose. Why? But you're on the right track. This doesn't include smell. So this is like your sensations. What do rats physically sense with? The whiskers. So if you look at a rat's brain, this is what it looks like. There's their whiskers all lined up in a row, and they've done the map of the brain, and there is a pair. Every time there's a whisker, there's a part of the brain specifically for that whisker, and I know it's hard to see here, but you can see there's kind of a circle here, a circle here. This is the actual brain. Every one of these little patches is devoted to a single whisker. So when one whisker moves, and only one whisker moves, only one little area of the brain becomes activated, and that gives them that fine sensation that they actually use to be able to move around with, because their head's first, and the whiskers are figuring out where they're going. It's like you putting your hands out there in the dark, they put their whiskers out there in the dark. Much more interesting than just brain stuff. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so we're done with my goofy examples. So Gagne says that when you actually now present your material, that you need to give your students learning guidance. So there are a million ways to do that, provide study aids. I'll show you some of the things I do. Repetition, trying to highlight important concepts. This is a mnemonic that you wouldn't know because it's a neural thing, but how many of you guys, do you use mnemonics when you teach? Anybody? No, they're horrible. I hate them. I never use them because I can't ever remember them. This one's why would you think that would be easy for students to maybe remember that? What does that look like? Way back in one of your horrible classes you probably had before, it looked like a chemical formula. That's easy to remember. They can do that. And that is actually related to nerves and muscles, but the way that that's written, that's a simple one for them to use. So I give them these because I will tell you right now, students do not, you probably know this, they don't know how to study. They have no clue on how to study. My medical students still don't know how to study. So how could that possibly be? How can you get to medical school and not know how to study? They're smart. What do they do as an undergrad? Same as your undergrads do. What do? They memorize stuff and they just pound it out and they get their grades. And then when they get into medical school, all of a sudden, wow, I need to be able to learn all this and then figure out how to apply it in all these situations. They struggle with it. So you need to kind of guide them through it a little bit. So I'll show you some examples of how I guide students. So here's another horrible picture. You don't even know what it is, but you can tell by looking at that that's not fun. This is actually part of the kidney, and it involves how the kidney makes urine, and it's a mess. And I have to teach this because this is what it is. There's a million details that they have to do, and there's slide after slide. So what I do at the end of this is I create a table, and I give them a blank table. And this is all the different parts of the kidney that they need to know. Here are all of the different items that they need to be able to say what happens where, and they start filling in this table. And then for them to fill this table in, they have to go through my entire 4 or 5 hours of lecture and pick things from the beginning and the end, and all of a sudden what starts happening? They start making connections. Stuff I talked about a week ago is coming back to stuff I did today. And once they fill this table out, guess what? They kind of learned the kidney all on their own. Now they don't know how to do this. This is how I would study this. They can't, the undergrads particularly, they can't put this together to do it. So I give them, when I find something that's really complicated, I find ways to create study guides for them rather than just list questions for them to do. Here's an active learning kind of thing for them to do. All right. I need to do some performance here. So I need my students to figure out what they don't know and they don't know. So these next kind of 3 come together. So I need time for them to practice. Sometimes I give them time to practice in class. I give them various things outside of class, and we all do this, case studies. I give them online practice quizzes, study guide questions. I do a lot of question asking in class. I don't do homework. I just don't, because I can't do homework with 300 people. I don't have a TA. I do it all by myself. So I don't do homework, but I need to give them opportunities to do that. And so one of the things that they like the most is to get like little online practice quizzes where they get immediate feedback. They take it on a chapter, they get the answers right away, and if they struggle with it, they can do it again on their own. So they're constantly getting some feedback that way. And this helps them learn. I mean, if they're out there, they're going to do this rather than, I don't know if your students do it, my students tend to make flashcards, which is horrible. Don't ever let your students make a flashcard because what happens when you make flashcards? Maybe, do you guys make flashcards?
We just had a whole
Oh, all right, well this ought to be interesting.
teaching colloquium
Uh-huh.
how to prepare for comps and flashcards.
All right, so teaching from what I teach, flashcards are horrible. So why did they say do it?
I don't know why.
Did you
I
do?
mean, it was just to that person, it was a useful.
I guess it depends on what you're teaching. With mine, what do they tend to do? Because what's on a flashcard? One little tidbit of stuff. And then that little tidbit is separate from the next little tidbit, and I don't need them to be separate, I need them to be together. And so I find that my students who use flashcards, they're learning the basic memory stuff, but they're struggling. They're getting 70s on my exams and 60s because most of those questions I'm asking that they're missing are the integrated questions. That table allows them to integrate. So, I guess everybody has their own theory.
Yeah, I think it came from a context, like if you're just memorizing, because we have to read like 300 books, memorizing like one argument.
Of each book.
If you see that author,
What clicks in your head?
What is he?
Yeah.
That's it, and that's
Yeah,
all.
and that works for that, but even then it gets kind of confusing. I can't. I mean, you have a stack of flashcards like this. I can't go. I can't do it. So what I have my students do, similar to that, is I'll say, go to my PowerPoint and find 8 or 9 slides that seem to be together and make a single study sheet. Take all that information and turn it into your own little study sheet. Now you've condensed 8, 9 slides into one simple study slide, and now they're starting to make the connections that way. But I guess the big point is they have no clue how to study. And I still sometimes, I don't think I know how to study. It evolves. So you got to guide them at least the best you can to figure it out. I also want to provide feedback. So if I'm asking them to do something, I need to be able to give them feedback. And this is one of these, has to be immediate, specific, and corrective. So they need to know what they missed. They need to not wait a weekend or a long time to get the information back, and I need to fix it. I just don't mark wrong. I need to kind of give them a chance to fix it again. So I do a lot of the in-class, again, this is in-class stuff. I give them quizzes, opportunities for me to give them feedback. I'll give you an example. This woman drove me crazy when I was an administrator. She taught microbiology. She had a class Friday mornings at 8 o'clock, and she gave a quiz every single Friday. So why did she give a quiz? Make people show up. She didn't give the quiz for them to learn. All she did was to make them show up, and she never graded the quizzes. So she would just stockpile them to make sure that people came. And what do the students want? I want to know what I missed, because I want to know, A, the most important thing is what's my grade, and B, the smart one said I want to know what I missed because I need to fix it. And so we got into a lot of arguments about that because she was not turning those quizzes back. So whatever you do, make sure that you get the information back to them so they have time to correct what they're doing wrong before the real exam comes along. And there's a million ways to do it, but I think it's something you have to consider when you're building your lectures. So here's one I do, another brain one. I'll do it in class. So I'll do 3 hours on the brain, and then I turn to this and I show them an example of brains of different animals. And I start comparing the human brain to all these other kinds of brains. And I know it's difficult for you to understand what's going on, but I'm going to point a couple things out for you. Here's a cat brain and a rat brain. They have this weird lump in the front that we don't have. What's their primary sense? And you had talked about it is smell. So this is the part of the brain that's associated with smell. In humans, it's buried way down here. We have it, obviously, but it is not an important part of what our brain is. If you look at a sheep brain, it looks kind of like a decent-sized brain, but sheep, I don't know if you're friends with sheep, but sheep are stupid. They're dumb. And they are big animals, and their brains, compared to a human brain, they ain't got much going on up here. They do have that sense of smell part here. Here's a chimpanzee brain. I mean, you really couldn't tell the difference. This is the coolest one, though. It's the dolphin brain. And if you look at the convolutions here, these folds are to increase the area of the brain so you can get more working power in. But if you look, they have the big lumps here. They use smell to find their way around. Their back of their brain here is huge. Here it is in humans. This is for balance and coordination. Huge part of their brain. And this lobe here on the side, you don't see it in a human. That is for hearing. So what do they use? Auditory, clicking, the sonar and the radar. So their brain is way more developed than ours is in a lot of these areas because it does what they do. So rather than me just listing a bunch of stuff, we'll spend 5 minutes on this as I'm transitioning to something else and make the students kind of tell me what they see here. And it's a really nice way to review some of the basics in a fun way rather than just kind of list things. All right, so the other thing we need to do is we need to assess the performance of our students. Again, how you do that is up to you, but one of the things I want to highlight here is assessment is for the students and the instructor. I need to know what they don't know so that I can fix it. And when I'm dealing with 300 people, it's sometimes not easy for me to know what they're not getting. And I'll talk about a couple ways that I do that. Some people build in quizzes in their PowerPoint slides. So you can you do a lecture for a while, then you have just some simple questions, multiple choice questions, have them raise their hand. You guys use the clickers? Anybody use the Respondus systems? And some people do. There's where you can have A, B, C, and D, and they can actually click what the answers are, and then it'll poll it. So you can see how many of your class picked A or B, and you can kind of do some corrective stuff. So there's always ways to be able to assess what they don't know. But I think sometimes in the actual time, it's more important for me than it is for them. So here's an example of what I do. So this is a blank in their PowerPoint slide. And then I say, okay, we just did this. I want you to stop, spend 2 minutes, partner up. And I literally make people who are antisocial get up and move with somebody who's not and sit there and talk to them. And they have to fill in the blanks. And I let them work on their own. And then I'll come back and I'll just start putting the answers in here, and we talk about it, and I'll hear a groan because I know, okay, they didn't get this one. Now I'm already getting ideas. There's the stuff that they don't get because they're all answering increases and the answers decreases. And this takes very little time, maybe 2 minutes out of my lecture, but this is really a good way for me to get a gauge on what my students know. And then the last one's easy. I want to be able to somehow show the importance of what I'm doing. For me, because I'm teaching in a medical field, this is what you're going to do with the rest of your life. So it's easy for me to make some transfers over. Sometimes in maybe some of the classes you're teaching, they're saying, well, what am I going to do with this, right? So you want to try to find ways to make those connections with your students. That's every brain rule can apply to that. So all we did so far, we haven't talked about teaching large groups yet. We talked about putting a good lecture together, but if you do that, teaching a large group is actually easy because that's 90% of the battle, to be honest with you. So there are still some things you need to consider. Am I okay on time? Okay. There's still some things you need to consider when you're dealing with large groups of students. So I'm going to ask you, what does large group mean? So when you maybe thought what you're doing today, what's a large group of students? 200? Anybody have a smaller number? 50? When I teach some of the clinicians, because some of the clinicians actually, they're talking 5, because they teach at a bedside. So anything more than 5 people for them is a large group of students. So it depends on what you're teaching and how many, yeah.
Saying the resources that you are using.
Absolutely, where you are. So if we pack this room, would you consider this a large group? Some people would. I've taught 25 people in an auditorium because I had to move to an auditorium for a day. That turned into a large group because if you're in an auditorium, it doesn't matter how many people are there, you're in a large group setting. So it's a combination of both things. Obviously, there's a million things that you have to deal with when you're dealing with them. How do you just manage the number of students? Most of my time is hand-holding and just trying to get them through what they have to do. All the different learning styles, active learning, limitations on the physical space. How do I connect with my students? That frustrated me more than anything because I knew my student's name in the other class. Now I barely recognize them. They see me in the hall and say, hey, Dr. P, I don't know who they are. That frustrates me. But I'm going to show you some ways where I'm trying to make some connections with them. And student-student interactions. They don't interact with each other because they're spread out in a big auditorium. And there's cliques. It's like high school. There's a clique here and there's a clique here. So I try to find ways to break those barriers down a little bit. I love this. This is what it looks like when I'm on stage sometimes. This is Matt Groening. This guy does The Simpsons. And so they're doing everything. They do everything. They're doing jabbing the kids back, noises, combing their hair, cursing the teacher, mumbling, giggling. They do it. I sat in on somebody's lecture today because I was evaluating their teaching. I sat in the back because I always sit in the back, and I'm watching. There's a guy watching wrestling video clips online. Somebody else, she was shopping for shoes. It is frustrating. And that professor sitting up there teaching, they have no clue that they're not taking notes on their PowerPoints. So I try to hopefully get them to not want to do that and to actually pay attention to me. So one of the things with these large groups is engagement. So when you are engaging with your students, what's that mean? Interacting. I think I'm engaging with you guys right now. But when I'm on stage, sometimes it's hard. I don't know what it is, but I will tell you what it looks like to me because I can't define it. So I teach physiology, which is how the body works. I also used to teach anatomy. I used to dissect cadavers. And so when I started to learn how to do that, I started to read about the history of anatomical sciences back to Da Vinci and all that kind of stuff. So here's how they used to teach anatomy. There's the little graphic pictures. They're paintings, so it's okay. So here are 2 of these, and you can see here that there's a man sitting in the chair. That is the professor. That's where the term chair comes from. They used to sit in the chair, and he is pointing down to a cadaver that's being dissected. The actual dissectors are sitting here doing the dissection as he's pointing down, and all the students are not paying attention. This is how they used to teach it back in the day. And you can see there's a dog eating entrails. This is a classic. These are from Renaissance art. So, and there's another one down here. You can see people aren't paying attention, professors in a chair. So when the Renaissance, during that time, Da Vinci was part of it, but there was another professor called Andreas Vesalius. He was a Belgian professor who was studying in Italy, and he changed how they taught. And this is a picture from the Renaissance of what he did. There he is, in the middle of doing what he's doing. All of his students are around him paying attention. That is engagement. This is not. I don't know how to define it other than that. This is what I try to create when I'm teaching. Even if I'm on stage and they're out there, I want this kind of attitude and not this kind of stuff. There are times when people do this. There's that imaginary line between you and your students, and sometimes students know when that line's there, and this is not good learning, this is. So how you create this kind of learning environment, I don't know how you do it. I think doing those lectures like we talked about goes to that, but your personality does too. I bring students on stage. We do reflexes, and I will bring them up. I'll give somebody a hammer and a flashlight. I'll have somebody else as the doctor and one as the patient, and I'll tell them what to do, and they're hitting each other with hammers and doing all kinds of stuff. They feel like they're part of everything. You know, you can't do that every day, but every once in a while, it's kind of good thing to try to do. All right, so some other things you need to consider. I mean, I've done a lot here, but you also need to think about your PowerPoints when you're doing it. And this just gets into this is my philosophy on PowerPoints. Keep it simple. Nice text, some images. So I'm going to show you a couple slides. Good slide or bad slide? You're going to try to teach from that. It's horrible. I mean, it's okay. I could teach from it if I had to, but what I do is, this is a hard pathway in the body, I turn it into this. So this is a simplified version, and I've highlighted the key terms over here, and I will go through that with them, and sometimes I'll flash it so that the definitions come up. Sometimes I make the students take notes, but whatever it is, this is how I would teach it first, and then I would go back to this one and kind of use it as a review. And once they see what I did, this is actually not as intimidating and they can do it. I'm going with it and I'm teaching them how to actually learn, breaking it down into the simple and then turning it into the complex. I try to make my PowerPoints like this more than like this. It's not easy to do, but again, it's my philosophy on trying to create something that is actively engaging my students. All right, so I'm almost done. So, interactive techniques. How can I actually get my students to interact with each other? You guys have probably done the think, pair, share kind of stuff where you have them like work in little groups and talk to each other. This is the one I like the most. There's a million things here, but I do this thing called the muddiest point. So on a Friday, I put boxes at all the exits, and I stop class 5 minutes early, and I say to the students, I want you to go through the week's worth of lectures, and on a piece of paper without your name, just write down 1 or 2 things that you don't think you know very well, and just throw it in the box on the way out. So they all do it. So I collect these up. Now it's a Friday, and I have 300 pieces of paper. And so what do we have to do is we have to make sure that it's done by Monday. And so what I do is I go home, and I just start separating out the papers. And guess what? It starts to fall into basically 2 or 3 categories. They all have the same problems. And all of a sudden, I know what they struggle with, and before we do anything new on Monday, I go over these materials again with them. It's my way of getting feedback without them even really realizing what I'm doing, and it works great. And I do that usually every other week as we've done a lot of material to kind of get a sense of what my students know. And there's a million ways that you can do that. You got to try to do something to figure out what's going on. So my last little thing is I try to create this is my educational theory. I create a learning smorgasbord. So here's what I tell my students. The minimal amount of stuff you do, you need to come to class, pay attention to me, take your test. Everything else is up to you. I'm going to give you as much other information as I can in multiple ways, and you can come do it. So I try to make my lectures necessary. I leave room for PowerPoint notes. Students can't skip my class. Now, do you guys have Camtasia stuff here? Do you guys need to do that at all? You know what Camtasia is?
We don't have it.
You don't have it on the main campus? Oh, okay. So in the medical school, they tape our lectures. Not like this. There's software that captures every click on the PowerPoint and captures my audio, and it'll load it up online. And so they can actually not come to my class and sit down and just press play, and my entire 50-minute lecture will be repeated to them on the PowerPoint and my audio. Now, why did the medical school say they wanted to do that? What was the use of that? Students are still supposed to come to class and then use that as a backup. Guess what students do? They don't come to class. Even the medical students, we call them Camtasia students because they don't come to class. Now, there are medical classes that attendance is mandatory, but the one I teach, it's not. And I've set in, there may be sometimes I have 110 first-year medical students, there's 25 or 30 that show up. Now, when I do it, they want to come because they're missing stuff. And you know what they want us to do? They want me to stand here and move the mouse because when I'm using my laser pointer, it doesn't show up on the screen capture. I refuse to do it. So I tell them, you have the option to come into class. If you don't, that's your problem. I still get my overhead out and do it. I turn the Camtasia off and I say goodbye to my Camtasia students. I'll see you in a few minutes. And then I do what I do and then I turn Camtasia back on. So after a while, they learn it's good to come to class. But I try to create that environment. I like to do first, I think you should do this regardless. Even if you're just teaching a lecture or two, you need to introduce yourself to your students, who you are, why you're teaching it. They need to know what's going on, not just here's some new guy, I have no idea who he is or who she is, let's talk about it. And I give all these secondary things. I have animations, websites, I'll do small study groups. I do chat rooms because we have a different thing online. We have Soul, which is like your eCampus. So the night before an exam, I'll do a chat room, which is dangerous. But we have rules. You can't ask me if this is going to be on the test because I kick you out. Students have cut and pasted out of my study guides. I can see it just directly out of here. I don't understand this. My answers are limited to like a sentence. So if I can't answer your question in a sentence, I'm not going to answer your question. And so they get it. It's for a last minute. I'm confused about this. Can you help me the day before a test? I'll get 40, 50 people in a chat room, which is kind of crazy sometimes, but we'll get a lot of people show up. I have a Facebook page for my class. It's a group page. I don't know if you guys gotten into that for your classes. It's not mandatory. I create a group page. They can join it if they want to. What I use it for is mostly information. Students don't read emails. They just don't. I found at least our students don't read emails, and sometimes they need to get it. But if I post it on the Facebook, it actually has a mechanism that I can simultaneously send the email to the Facebook page, and it posts there, and they're more likely to see it there than they are if I email it to them. Although now the trend is kids are getting away from, my kids are teenagers, the Facebook is old and stupid, they don't even use it. So college kids still use it, but in 6 or 8 years, Facebook's not going to be worth anything for teaching. They use Twitter, they use all kinds of other stuff, Instagram and all that. So I still haven't figured out how to do that yet, but at some point I'll probably have to do it. Here's the funny story. I had 2 students join the Facebook group page in the same class. They never met. And they actually started to become a couple because they met on Facebook. They were in my class. They had no idea they were actually in the class because there's 300 people there, and they're dating because of my Facebook group page. So, that's something I can put on my resume. But I try to give them as much as I can. And I really, I'm out there. My goal is to teach. That's what I do. I'm hired as a teaching professor. I don't do biological research anymore. So I have a lot of time to devote to this. Some people don't have as much time, and you probably don't either, but you can pick and choose little bits of things here that maybe you can figure out how to incorporate into your lectures. So let me leave you with this. I have 2 things to leave you with. How do you end a session? So you can, identify this as an important lecture for moving on. We can summarize, we can preview. I like to kind of do stupid stuff. So here's one of my previews. This gets the students in the class the next day. Our next lecture topic is gambling, drinking, sex, and your kidney. And that is actually one of my titles. I tell them I give them a hangover cure. I have a hangover cure that works. You will not get a hangover if you do what I tell you to do. And it's all based on what the kidney does. I have people bring their friends who aren't in my class to class to sit here and figure out how I'm going to bring in gambling and sex and drinking with the kidney. So that's kind of a good way to end a lecture. Now I have one more little thing for you. I'm going to show you a follow-up clip to that Big Bang Theory, and it's like a 10-second clip. Hopefully it works. Where is it? It's here.
Perhaps you should consider taking acting lessons.
Acting lessons. Interesting. It might help if I could act as though I care about my students and whether or not they learn.
So hopefully we're not going to get that bad and that cynical in our lives. So hopefully this was helpful. I will get that lecture, the PowerPoint, to Jenny, and you guys can have that. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.